Evan is the co-founder of Unigrid. They're aiming at providing people with decentralized internet. Evan has been working in the blockchain space since 2017, but actually started learning to program since he's 8 years old. So let's dive in. Hi, Evan. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
Doing very well, Stella. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Can you please give us a brief introduction to Unigrid and what's your vision?
Sure. So what Unigrid is, or what we'll be providing, is a decentralized, redundant, cloud-based services utilizing blockchain technology. This will be a democratic network where anyone can participate and join.
Okay. But what are the current issues that you see with Web 2 right now, with the Web 2 solutions for backup services, data storage, and anonymization services? Because I think this is also these are some of the issues that Unigrid are trying to solve.
Sure. I believe there's some confusion as to what Web 2 is and what the internet is, right? So Web 2 is actually the services that you're running on top of the internet. So where, say I need something like a Netflix, it's an actual web service, right? Where what the internet is providing the back end or the backbone to provide that service. So we like to call what we're doing Internet 2.0 because it describes a little bit better about what we're doing. In the current iteration of the internet, things are not inherently redundant. So your data goes up, it might be in one location. So companies have to spend quite a bit of money to move that data around and make sure that it's backed up in different locations. And even, in doing that, it might only be in two locations, whereas with our network, it's inherently is redundant, all the data that goes up. And part of the other problems you run into with the current iteration of the internet is that one server can go down and then your whole services go offline. We see it happen quite frequently with Twitter, for example, where we're all trying to tweet and all of a sudden, tweet's not loading, and it's, some problem with the server connection somewhere.
And in that aspect, do you see Unigrid in the future replacing the existing solutions that we have, such as Amazon Web Services or Google and Microsoft, all the drives that we have?
Yeah, so we like to, dream about completely replacing them, although that might be a tall task to ask for. We kind of see ourselves in the future as being a complement to what it is that they do and they offer. They have a lot of hardware, right? So in the future, it's hopeful that, some of their hardware will join our network, right? Because our services are different. We see that, as I said before, data on our network is inherently redundant. So once it goes up onto the network, it's sharded out and goes across the network. So it's immediately backed up. So you don't have to worry about, that data being offline or losing that data. And the same with the servers themselves. So we run in swarms, what we like to call swarms of nodes. So if one goes down, then there's 4 or 5 others that are running that same service. So you never have to worry about the downtime of, this server's gone down, I need to fix something. That is just handled by the network automatically. By default, Amazon, Google, they're not capable of doing this by default. You have to either pay extra or, spend the time to set up more and more servers on their network. And that even can cause a problem. Say if you're somebody that needs to provide a global service, right, and you've set up another server in Europe, but a lot of your users are in South Africa or North America, you still have a latency issue then. With our network, the services and the data goes across the whole, wherever the nodes are, it spreads across the whole network.
Okay, so what you see is more of a cooperation between those Web2 services and the sharded internet provided by Unigrid.
I think there can be definitely some cooperation there. I don't know how cooperative they will be because they will see us as a direct threat to their services. Because
yes, obviously.
A lot of what we're doing, it replaces the need for these data centers that have to go and sell their services, right? They have to go out and they have to market it, and that costs a lot of money. And a lot of times the servers are just idle. They're not providing the work that they could be providing. And the way that this network functions is it utilizes all of the network's resources. So for one, you need less resources, and two, it's constantly going to be online.
Yes, but beyond the data storage and the redundancy, you also provide with more privacy, right? Your
Correct.
users are provided with more privacy. So how do you do that? So are you going to replace the VPN services, or again, you see some kind of collaboration that would be
Right.
possible?
So we're actually currently implementing a VPN into the network, and that will work as what happens is you connect to one node, and it's like a fingerprint into that node. So it's already encrypted the tunnel, and then that node can go out and start communicating. So it's very different than, say, how Tor works currently, where you have these connections you can onion route, and you can listen to. If you have enough nodes, you can listen to the network. With Unigrid, it's just not possible, because all the data is encrypted and sharded.
Okay, and about sharding, so this is something I actually wanted to talk to you about. You use sharding and side chains. Can you give a very high-level definition for people who are not necessarily very technical of both sharding and side chains, and an overview of how they work together within Unigrid?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So what Unigrid is going to do is use many, many side chains, and they're very small. So that allows us to each one to perform different tasks, right? So we'll have one task that is a chain that's handling the data storage, another one that's handling the processing. And in the future, also many, many tiny chains that are each individual address. So what that kind of allows us to do is make the shard pieces very, very small. And I think a lot of the problems that some of the larger chains will run into is that they're trying to shard a very large amount of data, and that gets very complex. Whereas if they're very tiny pieces, it simplifies it a lot, and it also makes it much more manageable for the network.
Okay, but then dummy question maybe, but you said that each side chain is going to perform a specific task. What if one side chain for some reason goes down? How is this going to affect the whole network if that task cannot be performed?
Well, it's as I was saying before, the one node goes down, another one's going to back it up, and the network itself is inherently aware of its local swarm, right? So if a swarm realizes that there's some kind of down, it's going to adjust and say, we need to bring in more nodes, even if they're a little bit outside of its reach. It will start bringing in new nodes and say, we need to start spreading this, and kind of it's in a sense be self-aware. It'll be self-aware of itself and know that it needs to adjust, but we don't see the chains themselves going down. That's just not
Well,
happening.
According to you, from what I understand, sharding seems to be a very attractive option, and it's definitely a big topic this year, especially with the merge of Ethereum coming up. We hear a lot about the benefits of sharding, but there are also some criticism about the security. So because we talk about different possibilities of shards being taken over or hacks, how do you ensure the long-term data integrity when implementing such a system?
Right. So because the shards are very tiny, it's encrypted data, right? So even the next node that's connected to one node, it's not aware of what specific piece of data is on that node, and the node itself, it doesn't even know what that data is because it's all encrypted. So even if you're running a node and you try to hack into what that data is, you would be there for a very, very long time trying to figure out what it was, and by that time you could pass on.
Okay. Okay,
It's all
okay.
encrypted.
But so, do you think that the sharding model is going to render the typical blockchain model obsolete at some point because it's such an attractive option?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We've actually talked about running Bitcoin network on top of Unigrid to make it solve a couple of different problems. So we've thought about as a proof of concept or a proof of how this would work and how it would benefit not even not just the current internet but also current blockchains where you have this mass amount of storage that you need, and that as the chain grows, so does the amount of storage required. So you think about every single node that's running, you start adding together all the drive space that it requires, and it gets very, 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 very large very quickly. But what if you took that data and the whole chain itself, and you sharded it onto the network, and each individual block is confirmed by the hashes on the network itself, along with the hashes inside of the chain. You can store that whole chain on the network. Then what happens is when you have a node and you're running a node locally, you don't need to download the whole blockchain and confirm all those syncs because the network has already confirmed them for you. So you have this fully synced chain that's running on a network to where you have a local node running, you can sync with it instantly. So you connect a wallet and it's already synced because the network is already confirmed that everything is accurate and valid.
Oh, yes, we talked about that last time. Sharding Bitcoin. Yeah. What a project. Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely. But moving away from the more technical topics and going back to the decentralized internet and the possibilities it would offer, how do you see a world with the decentralized internet from, let's say, 5 years from now? How would it affect society economically, but also ethically?
We see that there's definitely a lot of movement, and as far as governments becoming more open to blockchain technology and what its use cases can be. And we see a lot more openness as well. We see a network or a future of an internet that is more decentralized, where the end users have an actual say in how things are running, and then also can partake in that network itself. This comes back to as well your privacy of your data, right? Your data should be your ownership. You should have a right to share it with who you want to, and who you don't want to shouldn't have access to it. It's pretty simple.
But I think it's also something that we see more and more in society, right? People being more and more aware of the importance of their data, the perspectives, for example, for monetizing them. So yeah, I think there's definitely a massive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the world is moving in that direction, and it's just going to be. I think a lot of our job is also in educating, right? We have to educate why that's a good idea, and why, everybody will benefit from, having a more decentralized and private network.
Let's say in 5 or 10 years from now, how do you see it looking like for people in their daily lives?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could definitely see that, people will have, say, for example, if you're connecting with your doctor, right, and you have very private data that I don't want, anybody to see that have access to that data. I think that, in the future, you're going to see, this communication of very private, sensitive information be protected to where it is something that, you actually have ownership of, right? And it's not something that's just easily accessible by anyone. And that comes not just from, a lot of that. Currently, the data that's there is it's protected to a sense where it's stored on private networks. But then the problem is, well, what if somebody gets into that network and gets that data out? We constantly see cases where networks are hacked into, right, and emails are stolen, everything, the whole database gets lost, and it just goes out onto some dark web somewhere, and you've lost, the data's gone. It's out in the public. So I think that a lot of those cases will be diminished. Less, there'll be less and less cases of that in the future.
Yes, and even in the crypto industry, those still happen. One use case that I found very interesting when reading up about Unigrid was for NFT creators and NFT holders, because as we know, on the blockchain, you can find a proof of ownership of a token, but the token themselves are often stored on servers that are not necessarily very private, and then the assets can still be stolen. Yeah. Can you talk about how Unigrid can come into play?
Yeah. I mean, as far as them being stolen, it's like, if you lose your private key, you're not your keys, not your coins, right? So that is always going to be an inherent problem. If somebody loses their key, then they're going to lose things. But, as far as the actual, data that gets stored, the data is stored on a centralized server. So what happens, that server can go down, it can, disappear. The developer can just decide, I'm done with this, and you've lost access to it because that server's just gone offline. So we think that there'll be a very big use case for that as well, where people will want to store their data on a network like Unigrid that is permanent and always available, right? So I think there'll be a pretty big use case for that.
Yes, definitely a lot of opportunities. But now, what do you think would be the biggest challenges and barriers to decentralized internet from both the regulatory aspect and the market's perspective, if any?
Right. Yeah. I think it's a lot of, as I said earlier, like it's a lot of education. Educating, these organizations and governments that this is not a bad thing, that it's a good thing, and that progress, whether they like it or not, is going to happen. I think this is a natural evolution of the internet and technology. It's just where it's moving. So they either, embrace it, or they try and fight it, and it's going to win anyways. We see a lot of, authoritarian regimes where they try and control the access of information, right? And that's something that is not going to be possible on a network like Unigrid, to where you can't block what somebody has access to and what they don't. It's up to that individual themselves. So, I think in, those specific countries, they're going to have a real problem. They're not going to be too happy, but, join it, or,
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that this technology is going to happen whatever we say. So in this case, we should buy Bitcoin because it's going to go to the moon. Is that what you're saying?
Personally, yeah.
Just joking.
I
no financial advice. Just joking. But but seriously, what's the best way to stay up to date and follow you guys' work at Unigrid?
Sure. So, we do update our website frequently, unigrid.org. We do have a blog that we run as well, where we post relevant articles called decentralized-internet.com. So we'd like to post stories there about everything decentralized. We're trying to expand it a bit more to where it brings in outside voices as well. And then, of course, following us on Twitter is always something you can do. We are pretty active on there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Evan, for your time. And thank you to our listeners for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye.